I'm Rachelle Archer, and you're listening to The Artful Leader. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Artful Leader. Today kicks off our first episode of season 3. And my producer, Caitlin, and I are so grateful to Rising Arts Leaders in San Diego for helping fund this round, where we will continue to learn from folks who are leading at the intersection of the arts, education, healing, and social change. And today's guest is a super inspiring leader in our community, Gaidi Finnie.
Thanks.
And I just appreciate you saying yes and kicking off this new season with your inspiring story. And I'd like to share a little bit about you with the audience. So Gaidi is the executive director of the San Diego African American Museum of Fine Art, which is a museum without walls and collaborates with other organizations to present and preserve the art of African Americans globally and to broaden the knowledge and understanding of the visual arts throughout Southern California and beyond. And most recently, they mounted Say Their Names, a memorial exhibit honoring individuals who have died at the hands of those perpetuating injustice and systemic racism. And it is a part of a nationwide initiative spurred by the protests of 2020 to put names and faces to more than 200 Black lives lost due to racial injustice, as well as honoring civil rights activists. And this is where I first met Gaidi, and you are so passionate about sharing these stories and so effective at connecting these stories to the community and using these really exciting tools from technology to make these stories more accessible. I just thought it would be super interesting to bring you on and talk with you a little bit.
Very good. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So another thing that I saw in your bio is that the arts have always been a part of your life. And from the time you were 16, that you knew you would pursue a way to share your love and appreciation for the arts with others. And that's really been at the heart of so much of your work. So I'd love to start at the very beginning and hear a little bit about where your love of the arts began. And if you'd be willing to walk us through some of the milestones that led you to becoming the director of this San Diego African American Museum of Fine Art.
Well, hell, you asked a lot.
We got time.
We got time. All right. Well, I'll go back to the beginning. It's interesting because in high school was in the 60s, the late 60s, and the Black nationalist movement was very prevalent at the time. In fact, my high school was a very crazy high school because the Black Student Union at the high school, every year that I was in high school, was taken over by the Black students and locked the doors and took the school over for the weekend or a week or whatever in the protest. And some of the results of that was more Black teachers. We got a Black library in our high school as a result of that. And I also, during that time, and I got involved in it, from early on. And during that time, I also got to work with Amamu Baraka Leroy Jones, the poet and playwright, who had an organization in Newark, New Jersey called CFUN, the Committee for Unified New Art. So I would go there on the weekends and study the Kwanzaa principles and all of that. And then most people didn't change their names at that time. Mm-hmm. So I was not born with Gaidi, and I won't tell you what I was born with, but that was when I changed my name. 1972, I think it was, that happened. And in those studies, I really got to have an affinity for culture, African-American culture, and the Black nationalist movement. Well, funny thing happened. I got so involved with this. I was the head of the School Improvement Committee, the head of the Black Student Union. I sat on CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality. I sat on NAACP. And what happened was I burned out. I burned out in high school. So in, I think, April of that year, I quit. Just quit high school, start working at UPS, packing boxes.
Wow.
And I did that for a good while. one of my friends who I used to teach the things I knew, his father said to me, say, what are you doing? You need to go to school. You're too smart to be working in UPS. And I owe him a debt of gratitude because that's what made me go and apply to go to school. Now, since you have time, um, the funny thing, the school that I had got to go was called Lee College in Albert Lee, Minnesota, right? And Albert Lee, Minnesota was a school, it was a baby boomer school. And in Albert Lee, Minnesota, which is, I'm from the East Coast, never even left the East Coast yet, first time. So I get on a plane and fly there. And we can't land the plane in Rochester, Minnesota, because it's too much snow. Too much snow to land a plane. And so they changed the route and went to Minneapolis, St. Paul, the Twin Cities, and landed there. And then we had to wait for a bus to get to Rochester, but it's going to be hours and hours long because too much snow.
Yeah.
So when we got to Rochester, finally, I said, okay, we can't go to Albert Lee, not today, because too much snow. So we're going to stay there, overnight in Rochester. And the next morning, get there to the train station in Albert Lee. And guess what? You can't get to the campus. You can't get there. Why?
It's snowed in.
It's too much snow. So I had to call the professor of the school to come to the train station or whatever, the bus station, and pick us up. This one guy was there the whole time was with me, which I should tell you, after this, I never saw him again. He left and never came back. Anyway, so I get there, and the school consists of a barn, a gymnasium, and a skiing place, chalet. Mm-hmm. That had been turned into a dorm. And so that was my first experience of college, was to get there and knowing the guy who was with me the whole time, he never came back. But oddly enough, that school only had 50 people in it. And it closed after 6 months. And we all moved to Minneapolis to a college there called Augsburg College, where I studied theater. Mm. And more as a director than anything else. That's how I got my my degree in theater and in communications, sort of thing. So it was really Minnesota, an indoor area, right? That makes you want to do all kinds of creative things inside. San Diego's different. Everybody's outside doing stuff. In Minnesota, right. you're for instance, if you don't have a girlfriend in September, you are dead in the water till April. Ain't nobody, you're not going to see anybody. No one's going out because it's too much snow.
Right.
So at any rate, during that time and going into theater, I also, before I finished college, I started selling art in an art gallery up in Edina, Minnesota, a very wealthy area, where I started to learn more about the arts and theater and music and dance. And that was really part of living in Minneapolis. And I really gave a lot of credit to just a degree. I worked at the Guthrie Theater. I was a guard at the Institute of Arts, just kind of being involved in the arts. And so it really became part of me at that time. I mean, different and wonderful, but it did. So that's the background. I'll stop there and wait for your next question.
Yeah. And so if we fast forward to now, you're in San Diego and you're the director of this, African American Museum of Fine Art. How did that come to be? I'd love to hear the story of that.
Yeah, when I got so my last day of law school, right? I stayed and went to law school, and a friend of mine from Paris, a photographer, flew over to help me pack the house up and move to California. And he wanted to take pictures of the country as we drove across the states. Mm-hmm. So we did, and we took pictures all over and got to San Diego, parked a big truck and got in the car and went to Balboa Park. And we went to MOPA, the Museum of Photographic Arts, to see the work there. That was my first day in San Diego. First place I ever visited was MOPA, which, by the way, ended up being assistant director of for 9 years
Wow.
later on.
Mhm.
Also during that time, I just wanted to, I was trying to get a feel for the community. And it's difficult because everybody's outside. It's hard to meet people when you first get to San Diego. And I think I tell all people that that's different.
Yeah.
It's hard to make friends early on because everybody's outside doing stuff.
Right.
But I started getting involved in various things, movements. I also became involved with the San Diego African American Museum of Fine Art back then, when the leadership was Shirley Day Williams, who passed away in 1999.
Mm.
And it sat defunct all that time until I decided to revive it in 2014.
Oh, wow.
So that's how it came about. I decided I was working at Bayview Baptist Church, and there was a space there that was um, just hold on a second, let's do this. Okay, Google, stop. Thank you. um, I was working there, and I saw that space, that auditorium space that they use for various events, and I said, "Ah, this could be a place where I can put a museum." And I
Mm.
talked to the senior pastor at the time and said, let's do it. So that was my first exhibit of the revived African American Museum of Fine Art, was at the church. The thing is, the church, Bayview Baptist Church, is so busy. I could only take over a space there for a few weeks at a time before they needed it for this or for that. And so it really was still a museum without walls, but we had temporarily this kind of space. And
Mhm.
also the vision really was to have the best art
Mm.
done from around the world regarding African American art and the African diaspora, and finding a place that could hold it. So I really changed and decided to work with all the other museums who had passed that test that the American Associations of Museums has in order
Mm.
to house really great art. You can't bring an art piece from the Smithsonian unless you have all the bells and whistles in your space,
Right.
security, lighting, fire equipment, all of that stuff has to
Yeah.
be there before they will allow you to have it.
Yeah.
So that was the goal, really, was to have art from around the world come and stop here in San Diego and keep going.
Mhm.
Because the Museum Without Walls, I wasn't trying to collect.
Right. Right.
So we went about the business of working with other museums. So thus far, we worked with the Menge. We did the
Mm.
Black Dolls exhibit, the Veterans Museum, where we did a Gordon Parks exhibit, the
Mhm.
San Diego Museum of Art, where we did all the LA photographies exhibit. We
Mm.
did an exhibit with the Contemporary Museum, where we highlighted their collection of African American art. And along the way, I also got involved in just the whole culture itself as part of this.
Yeah.
And so what we decided to do was to do a annual event called Keepers of the Culture, where we honor those people who kept African American culture alive. For instance, this year we have Elliot Lawrence, the musician. Um, we have a number of other people that we're honoring this year, but it's going to our fourth year now. I'm doing it, so we do that as well.
Mhm.
And then COVID hit. Well, shucks, COVID turned all the museums in the country and in the world to be museums without walls.
Right.
Imagine that. Now I'm
Yeah.
saying to myself, no, wait a minute. If everybody's a museum without walls, and we've been a museum without walls for a long time, we should be the leaders during this period. And you
Mhm.
think, and I thought about this, okay, so what does that take? Well, it takes doing exhibits that are powerful enough and important enough to be respected worldwide.
Mhm.
And it also meant I had to find a kind of exhibit I could do outside
Yeah.
and respect the requirements of COVID. So in doing so, I sought out and found the Say Their Names exhibit.
Yeah.
And you mentioned it early on what to say the names, but it was very important because you could do it outside and have it the distances apart and all that. And so as I tried to make that happen, the laws kept changing almost every week.
Yeah.
First, you could have 25 people, then you could have 50 people, then you could have 10 people, then you have no people. And so having that, then I also had the issue of where to put it.
Yeah.
So I worked with the Commission for Arts and Culture trying to find a space. I worked with the Port of San Diego trying to find a space, and a lot of them wanted like gargantuan amounts of money
Yeah.
for a month exhibit. They would charge me $4,000 or $5,000 a day, or a week like that, or a week. And
Wow.
I was trying to figure out, and so every time I got close, I get slammed down by someone saying, "No, you can't do it. You can't put it there. COVID's there. COVID's there."
Yeah.
I was at my wits' end, really. I really was, and Seaport Village was the other one. Got close and couldn't do it.
Mhm.
But then the new Children's Museum has a
Mhm.
space outside along the Martin Luther King Promenade,
Which is perfect,
which
right?
was perfect.
Yeah.
And they were also a museum without walls, too. They hadn't been in their museum for a year
Yeah.
either. So we talked and we said, let's try to do this outside and get this done. But just at that same time, they decided to also have a museum outside. So, and I love kids, but it's not really wasn't conducive to
Mhm.
have us side by side, a very sensitive and emotional exhibit right next to the kids going crazy like that. And for a long time, we couldn't have a resolution, but finally we did. We figured out a way to work together. And we built a fence around the exhibit. And n- I had the idea to photogrammetry the exhibit before it opened. Now, say their names. What it is a group of pedestals, 50 pedestals with 4 images on each side, and each side has a picture of someone who's died by racism or police brutality. So that's
Mhm.
200 images.
Yeah.
I hired a company, Artworks, to build the pedestals. I had a photography company to make the images on aluminum so they could be outside.
Mhm.
Then I hired a florist to come in every few days to replenish the flowers on the top. But before anyone got the chance to see the finished product, I did photogrammetry. Photogrammetry is a technique where you take pictures, digital pictures, maybe 200 of one thing,
Mhm.
and then there's software that makes it into a model.
Mm.
So then you have a 3D model of this piece that you've taken all these pictures of. So I had the whole thing photogrammetried, and I didn't know what it was going to look like at the end. I didn't know, and then I opened the exhibit that lasted about a month. A few weeks into the exhibit, the gentleman, Josh Tonias, I think I'm saying properly, he came back with the finished product of what the photogrammetry product. And I went, oh my God, that is the slickest, coolest, most fabulous thing I've ever seen. What am I going to do with that? I can't just let it out. It's too slick. It's too cool. It's cool. It's too everything. This, you've got to wait. We got to find a way or something to tell us. And I'm a big believer in the universe telling me to do something. And a big believer. And when the universe tells me, all of a sudden, whatever I'm thinking of has legs. And I can
Yeah.
see the legs saying, this is it.
Here we go.
Right, it's got legs. So I'm talking 6 months later or
Yeah.
better. I'm still thinking, I mean, all the time trying to figure it out. I've never stopped thinking about what to do with this. 6 months later, I'm watching the Sunday morning show on Sunday morning, of course, at CBS. And it came to a story about Seneca Village in New York City.
Mm.
Seneca Village is a place where the Black people who lived there were displaced in order to build Central Park.
Right.
And there's a monument there and a pathway and all that. And I thought, the universe has spoken. It has spoken. That's the place. That's where I have to hunt them down. So I sit on the board of Balboa Park Forever Balboa Park.
Mhm.
It used to be called the Balboa Park Conservancy, who has a relationship with the Central Park Conservancy.
Mm.
It made introductions for me to get started on this project. Well, lo and behold, Central Park Conservancy said to me, look, we don't got nothing to do with that. We raise money and all that, but no, that's Parks and Recs. And, so okay, fine. Let me hunt down Park and Rec. I hunt down Park and Rec, couldn't find anybody who knew anything about what to do with this. And finally, I found someone who said to me, here's your official answer. Because you're going to do augmented reality, you don't have to build anything. There's nothing for you to see. You do not need a permit. You don't need approval. That's your official answer. And I went, I ain't going for that. I'm sorry. No, I'm not coming from San Diego, putting this exhibit up, and nobody says it with nothing. I just can do it. No, 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 I ain't doing it. So
I
I,
don't buy it.
no. So I found what's called Manhattan Community Group 10. And they manage a special, they relate to a certain area of the park that encompasses Central Park and Seneca Village. And I made a presentation to them. And I at the end of the presentation, and then another one to the full body. And they gave me a letter on New York City letterhead, said, listen, we want this to happen. You approved to move this forward. Good luck. Go with God, so to speak. Yeah. So that is how the Say Their Names exhibit came to be. It really was, it was to say the names that I did in front of the New Children's Museum, photogrammetry into an augmented reality exhibit. And what that means is you can only see the exhibit if you look at it through your phone. You can't see it otherwise. You go to park, there's nothing there. That's why they said there's nothing you can do. So that was a challenge for a few reasons. One is you can't have any signage in Central Park. You can't build any structures. If you have a signage thing in there, you can only have it for an hour. Now, I knew about the gates that was done there some years ago, and that was it was in the wintertime and it lasted for a few weeks. I don't know who got to choose to get that done, but they tell me, no, you can't have it. So the challenge was, how do we get people to come?
Yeah.
And when they come, how do you get people to see it? Because it's not there.
It's like playing Pokemon on your phone, right?
That's right. Yeah, you got it, but with a very serious, sensitive side to it, because of the passion of it, And as you look through your phone at the exhibit, you can walk right through the exhibit as if you're at the museum. You walk around it and circle it. And so what we decided to do was do a challenge. So once you saw the exhibit, the challenge was to pick one pedestal and read and say their names on one pedestal. So there will be 4 names. And then you would take your phone and put it on social media and say, now it's your turn. Now the exhibit is geolocated. In other words, it's there right now, but nobody knows anymore because I've told them it was off. I can turn it back on, right? So it's the only place you can see it is in Central Park in that location. And I did it for a very short run, just so that people wanted to maybe see it in other parts of the country, they can contact me and I can have it done really simply by pushing the button on my phone and setting it up in Paris in front of the Eiffel Tower if I wanted.
Or the Louvre or something.
So that's the end. That's the most recent project. There's lots of stuff going on, but I'll wait for your next question and answer that.
Yeah, no, I mean, you already kind of did a lot of it, but so you did the physical Say Their Names exhibit in San Diego. You also did the buses are coming this summer at Courtyard here in San Diego, and then this amazing virtual exhibit in Central Park this fall. And I'm just curious, like, what's alive for you now after having an opportunity to share these stories with the world, using these new technologies, like widening the reach of the museum? Like, what does this all mean for you and these stories and this art? It's amazing to me.
Well, San Diego is a funny thing. I found that many people don't think San Diego has the great art. They go to LA for the same art and think it's fabulous. And I've been dealing with that for some years. I mean, I would put on these exhibits and people, they would go to LA to see it, but they wouldn't come here to see it. And it's like, and I
Same
said, you know what? Yeah.
Right.
And I'm saying, and I said to myself, no. I'm after world-class art, world-class recognition of art from San Diego. And it was the reason I could go to New York and do that exhibit. We knocked it out of the park. We had so much press. We had so many people talk. It was the talk of the town, TV, radio, newspaper, all over about our exhibit, little
Yeah.
old San Diego, right?
Yeah.
And so um, I have been working on projects outside the country. They're not coming to fruition yet.
Mm-hmm.
But also the city of San Diego has given the museum the to develop a Black cultural arts district. And
Mm.
that was just done maybe 2 months ago. And we
Yeah.
created an advisory board to help us to figure out what has to happen there
Mm-hmm.
for the Black cultural district. And so that's moving along.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I also, um, this is a funny story because when I was working on the Say Their Names augmented reality in New York, I went out there for the first time to see the location, to make sure there wasn't not too much shade, to make sure that the terrain was good and all that. And
Right.
while there, I had remembered I'd applied for a grant for augmented reality, I don't know, maybe 6 months before, but while in New York working on it, I get a call from Verizon saying, you are one of the winners of this grant. They chose 10 museums in the United States with $1 million. Each of the museum got $100,000 to develop an augmented reality
Yes.
project. Now, now the funny thing is I'm already doing one in Central Park, which is a major,
Yeah.
and I get a call and said, you just got $100,000. And I jumped up. I jumped in the street and I'm screaming. People said, I want to be your friend. I want to be your friend. Because I'm so loud
Hey,
screaming.
Eddie.
I just got $100,000. So so uh so that whole grant thing, it was really difficult because I couldn't remember what it was for. At the time, I was just thinking, great, great. What is it for, right? As it turns out, that grant is a grant for to build curriculums for educators around the country to go into their portal, a teacher can go into their portal, pick out a subject matter, and a lesson plan is there to teach it, and it has to do with augmented reality. I liken it to when my kids were small and I went to their parent teacher and they were doing PowerPoint in third and fourth grade. Like, wow. Well,
Yeah.
this is what they're doing now in third and fourth grade. They're doing augmented reality and metaverse and all of that stuff. That's what they're teaching. So because I was already doing one, they're thinking that we are the leaders in this area.
Yes.
And so we have been developing curriculum, a little bit about the buses are coming.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at a Harlem Walk of Fame,
Mm.
working with the Schomburg because they were so impressed with us. They want to collaborate again. And also a walking tour of the Black Cultural District that will highlight some of our ancestors who we stood on their shoulders. Those things are in the works. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot what all this means to me is that I understand I have the ability, God-given, if you will, to make this kind of thing happen. And I don't want to waste it. So for the most part, it's all volunteer. I have a fabulous board that works with me. No one gets paid, including myself, all these years.
Wow.
More recently, though, people say, you're crazy, but you got to survive somehow. You got to get, so I decided to start taking a little bit like independent contractor money to help me stay afloat.
Yeah.
But the mission is so important. And I'm crazy for saying this, but it's more important than me getting paid.
Mm.
And because my background really wasn't, while I was worked at the Museum of Photographic Arts, I was assistant director there and director. I was the managing director at North Coast Repertory Theater. And mostly in the business area. I was doing the business part, while the other side did the art part. So I have this background in managing the business of arts. And it's super important because I know as a nonprofit what not to do.
Right.
I know because I have done furloughs and layoffs, and that breaks your heart when you have to do that. I mean, it just kills you to have to let people go because you can't afford it. And at the same time, I'm trying to figure out, how do I get them paid? I mean,
Yeah.
many times I don't even know where I'm gonna get the money from to pay them. And the worst times of the year, believe it or not, were the holidays.
Yeah.
because all the giving would stop and you have this time off, people would just be gone and then you get paid again. All right. I used to hate the holidays because I didn't know how to figure out how to pay people. So
Yeah.
I'm very sensitive to making it run so that it can sustain itself and not go into debt and not, fall apart or whatever these organizations do when they go under. So it's
Mhm.
important to me to manage them. Now, there's another side of me, because when I'm dreaming about what's going to happen and the vision and the exhibits, I don't care how much it costs. I don't really
Right.
care. It could be $1 billion. I don't care. Once I have the project, I'm all about how it's spending money to make sure that everything is put in the right place. And all these grants have these final reports you have to do and all of
Yeah.
that. Sometimes, and I found myself, you know what? Looking for large sums of money is the same, as looking for small sums. So I just go to the big ones if I
Yeah.
can. So what it means to me, I guess the bottom line is, I am passionate about my ability to make this happen and to give it back to the community. You mentioned earlier the Kwanzaa principle that was so important to me. And it's a funny thing. It's called Kuumba. And
Mhm.
it says to do what you can in every way that you can to leave the world better than you inherited it. And that's the definition of creativity under Kuumba. Now
Mhm.
imagine that. That's just, and I used that my whole career to develop ideas. It's like, no, I want it to be more beautiful. That's really all it is.
Mhm.
More beautiful than we inherited it. And so it gives me a lot of space to do creative things that I understand it creative because I can clean my house and it's creative. I remember raking leaves and stuff in the sand on the beach here when I first moved, just to make it. I wanted to be like Caribbean sand. And I started raking to make it all beautiful. The next day it was all ruined, of course. But it's still under my principle of creativity. And
Mhm.
I live by that funny principle, just to leave the world better than I inherited it. And and I don't just talk, you know. And in fact, I was at a meeting last night. I said, "Sorry, guys, I'm not one of these big talking people, but I do a lot,
Yeah.
and I can make things happen." So that's the gist of it. Is that you know, it's like I have the energy and the creativity and the relationships that I've built to make this move forward and to do many things. But again, I have a great board that are a working board because we're all volunteers.
Yeah.
Jump in when necessary. And then the community itself has really been supportive in a lot of ways. But you have to, bring the horse to the water, so to speak, and make them drink.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, I just think that we will be recognized, I hope, all
Mhm.
over the world as
Yeah.
being a great institution.
Yeah.
That's my quest.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I'm sure you will with
I'll
with
try. I'll
this
try.
brilliant approach. You shared a little bit about like these sort of large impacts you've had with like the African American or the Black Cultural District here in San Diego or different things like that. And I'm just curious, like, if we were to kind of like drill it down on a more personal level, like what's the importance of sharing this kind of art and these kind of stories to individuals? What are the kinds of things that you hear from folks who are involved in this and who are impacted by the things that they're seeing in these exhibits?
Um, a few years ago, when Obama was president, there was a time when I think the gentleman's name was Gates, Henry Louis Gates. He was trying to get in his house in Connecticut or whatever, and while trying to open the door, they arrested him.
Mhm.
For breaking in and entering in his own house. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And 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 so that was just this strange time. How crazy racist is that?
Yeah.
And I remember that Obama and him sat on the porch and had a beer and talked about it.
Mm.
You know? And during that time, I understood more about what's called teachable moments. And
Mm.
I think that something we can all live by. Racism is a sickness,
Yeah.
but means like COVID, you can get better,
Mhm.
right? So you have to communicate and have these teachable moments that opens eyes to change and what really is and what's important and how we relate to each other. Um, it's the essence. That's the thing. That's getting down to the individuals is saying, look, I'm doing this really to help you be a better person.
Yeah. Yeah.
The buses are coming was very interesting because this whole idea of COVID and technology and all that and how to have it, because it started out wanting to do some immersive civil rights exhibit.
Right.
That's how it started out. Even to say the names was part of that whole concept.
Yeah.
And I had seen Wonder Spaces, I think it's called here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I went there once. I went, look at this. Maybe if I did it, I could have different rooms that had different aspects of the civil rights movement.
Mm.
And I thought, wow, this is an idea. But then a few Thanksgivings ago, my son got an Oculus, the VR headset.
Yeah.
And in that, I put it on, and there was a thing called Traveling While Black in there that you can watch it. And you're sitting right next to people. I mean, you're really immersed in it. And I thought, versus having to build a whole building, we could do it using virtual reality, these goggles, and try and create it there. So I went about trying to discover how to get that done. And I came up with 4 vignettes. Emmett Till, Malcolm X, the bombing of the 4 girls in Georgia, and the Freedom Riders. And as I tried to develop these various vignettes to go into the headsets, I understood that you also had to have an actual exhibit to go with it.
Yeah.
Like a physical one.
Yeah.
So same thing, went about the idea of trying to figure out, okay, where would I put it under this time? With COVID going on, who's going to allow me to have this and all that? So I fought. That's when the trouble is. When you collaborate, you got to get someone to let you in, right?
Yeah.
I could not. I mean, I kept falling. I kept trying, and no, and then no, and then no. And I don't want to mention the organizations that turned me down, but they're big ones, and we got close, and we had drawings and meetings and all that. And I was invited by the same organization that you're involved, I think, Rise, to do a panel discussion at the courtyard. And I looked around and I went, maybe this could be the place.
Yeah.
So I did that, and I was working with Peter Fink. Now, Peter Fink is an artist from around the world. He lives in London. And Peter Fink and I, you probably don't know this, came up with the idea to light the Coronado Bridge as an art piece. And it's the concept's done, and they did the demo, and I've seen it. And I'm really proud of that. And so Peter and I have been friends since we had this idea. And so he helped me find some contractors and builders to help me build the exhibit, which you saw. And then, oddly enough, it was the 60th anniversary of the Freedom Rides of 1961 during COVID.
Right.
So they postponed it a year, and that postponement allowed us to have the exhibit here and bring some of the Freedom Riders. So that's how the Freedom Riders happened. And it also was part of that whole big picture of immersive civil rights and teachable moments and using this as a way of healing people. Yeah. Which is like, I mean, that's a roundabout way to get to the answer of your question, but I just wanted to see how I got there. Yeah. And I still do those sort of things to help. Yeah. To help.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so powerful as someone who's, visited the exhibits a couple of times and spent a lot of time. And something we didn't really mention is that all of those exhibits also had like QR codes where you're clicking in and could get the stories of each person and, all this amazing footage as the buses are coming and interviews with people who'd been involved and stuff. And it was life-changing for me.
Yeah. Well, what happened was, here's the thing, Rachel, because my thought was to have a little dinner party, private the day before, and then a big function the day after for the public. And the night that they arrived, some of them, we went out to dinner, and I'm sitting with dinner at them, and there's stories they were telling me at dinner. Went, oh my God, this look, I'm changing everything. I left that dinner, called my board, and said, look, we're changing everything. We're going to have them talk, tell stories, and in between we could eat some of. This is about the storytelling. And that night was magic. You were among heroes that risked their lives for your behalf. Yeah. And what they went through, I
Yeah.
should tell you one of the stories. You want to hear a good one?
Yes. Good.
Um, one of the youngest of the Freedom Riders, he and his buddy were in Mississippi, and he heard about the Freedom Riders coming to their town in Mississippi, and they wanted to go over there. But his parents, of course, wouldn't let them because of all the brutality and all that stuff. So he and his buddy took their bicycles and snuck out while their parents were at church, and took a bicycle ride over there. And when he got to the bus station, the white only, his friend pushed him in the door of the whites only. And when he went in there, the guard or whatever said to him, "You're one of those freedom riders." He says, "No, what's your name?" And he told him his name. Where you born? And he said, "You're one of them freedom riders." And they put him on death row in jail. On death row, 13 years old. He was there a week. Mother didn't know where he was. The friend who dropped him off had just kept going and didn't say anything to anybody. So maybe a week later, his mom finally figured out where he was and went to there and saw him in this jail. And she was jumping over tables and jumping over chairs to get to him, hug on him and love on him and all that. They say he was alive and she loved him and all that. Man, so they got in that car and left that jail and got home. And when they got to the house, she said to him, "Go get me a switch." She said, "You disobey me, it's gonna beat your butt." She beat his butt for disobeying her. But that's just one of the funny, cool, interesting stories, painful as it was. But it was like that. But that's that kind of exhibit.
Yeah.
It was a powerful exhibit. And it can travel, by the way, in case somebody wanted to see it in another part of the country. But anyway, that's one of the funny stories.
Yeah, amazing. So, if folks who are listening want to connect with you or learn from you or get involved with what you're doing in some way, how do they find you?
Yeah, we have, of course, our website and all of that, on the social media. But our website is San Diego African American Museum of Fine Art, or SDAAMFA.org.
Okay.
And then that's all the images of stuff that we're doing. And we are poised. And I knew this during COVID. I knew that we were poised like butterflies. We were just gonna come out smoking when COVID was over. And we have a long ways to go in that come out part. And so this idea of the Black Cultural District, the idea of the Say Their Names traveling around the world, the ideas of working with other big exhibits that we have planned, the Verizon project, all of that is going on right now. And I am taking a mental breather after after I went to New York. I just needed them because the ideas come to me like all the time. And sometimes I say, "Somebody stop me." Because I've got these things keep popping in my head to do. And we will continue to do that. We will continue to make a difference and try to make this world a better place.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Well,
our
thank
job.
you so much for sharing your inspiring stories and your vision and for the work that you do. It's so important. And I appreciate you taking the time to connect with me today.
You're very, very welcome. Goodbye, everybody. Nice talking to you.
Bye. Thank
Yeah,
you.
ciao for now.